This is Jason Anderson, Chairman, and we are calling a special Town Council meeting to order. It is currently 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. For roll call purposes, all council members are in attendance except for Mr. Grandelski and Ms. George, who are both absent with notification. We'll move on the agenda. Item 3, interviews of boards and commission applicants. We have none this evening, so we'll move on to item 4, citizen statements and petitions. We just ask that you keep your statements to 5 minutes, and this time period for citizen statements and petitions is not to exceed 45 minutes. And with it being a special town council meeting, we ask you to keep your comments pertinent to whatever's on this evening's agenda. And the only item on this evening's agenda is deliberation on Board of Education budget. At this time, I will open up for a public comment. Anyone who wants to make public comment, please come up to the podium and state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Birdie. I live at 125 Lake Road in Killingly. I have 2 children that attend the Killingly public school systems. I know the Board of Education did not pass, and I'd like to speak on what occurred on that Monday night's meeting at the high school. It was appalling to see teachers and school staff conduct themselves in such a disrespectful, hateful manner towards the town council members while minor children were present. It was also disgraceful to witness grown adults using children as a ploy by fear-mongering them into thinking their favorite teachers would be losing their jobs. I also find it pathetic that a mother who happens to be a staff member of Killingly Public Schools of a child who spoke at that meeting called a town council member and demanded an apology from that member, giving her opinion on a public comment that was made, which was public, aka recorded and posted on social media. If you don't want people using their First Amendment rights to give their opinion on someone who spoke publicly, then don't use your child as a pawn to keep your job. I'd also like to mention that my children have had countless problems within the school system, such as bullying. Kids are watching their teachers bully others and wonder where it's coming from. Not all teachers are like that. However, the ones that are acting in that manner are giving Killingly teachers a bad reputation. You want more money, but yet can't conduct yourselves in a professional manner in front of minor students. Perhaps Sue Lannon and the superintendent shouldn't have hired so many DEI staff, which was not mandated to do so. Since that funding is now gone, they expect us taxpayers to foot the bill, and we say no. And Lannon, you can wipe all those fake tears away, but we see right through you. Lannon has not only called in her commies to speak at several events, encouraging using minor children as a ploy, but has also encouraged people to vote in a certain way, which, if I understand correctly, not sure if that's legal. You want more education. If you want more money, maybe you should do better as Killingly Board of Education and fix the broken system that you created, because us taxpayers are not responsible for your mistakes. I think that the Board of Education needs to take more accountability and do better. I don't think that by having so many administration staff that it's necessarily good for the budget. I think that if we had less administration staff, we would be able to pay our teachers more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ian McDonald, 548 Valley Road. Just want to address one thing here. As one of those people who apparently use my child as a prop, we did not have any babysitting that evening, and I didn't really want my kids at that event. They had aspect testing the following day, and they were up late. That was less than ideal, but we did not have babysitting, so that's why they were there. When my son came up to the microphone, I said to him, I said, "Are you going to talk?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You sure you want to do that?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, if you're going to talk, you got to give your address." So that was the extent of my coaching of him. And I think people who know my son, maybe there's a lot of things he can't do, but he can talk. And I thought he acquitted himself well. And, I don't think it's bad to be hearing different perspectives at these meetings. And that was his perspective. We heard from bus mechanics. I want to hear from people who are struggling maybe to pay. I think that's all valid. So, these narratives get built that, we're using that. Definitely did not hear this from Miss Lannon, and to the extent that I have heard something from Miss Lannon, she's been pretty studious to say, I don't care how you vote, but I want people, to get out and vote. I think that's perfectly appropriate. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And she certainly is not conducting things behind the scenes. That is not how she operates. And I don't think whether folks disagree with her personal budget, I think that's fine. But I don't think the idea that she's some puppet master here, it's not accurate. I can say that. In terms of, one thing I do have now, you look at the votes, you look at the numbers. If we're going to have these questions on too low, too high, I think we need to do the math afterwards and take that into account when we look at our decisions. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the point is of those questions. The other thing I'll just say is, I have one thing I want to compliment. I'm not sure who it was. Somebody got up during the public hearing and said, what about this line item? What's with this figure? Why is this figure so much? And I thought that was a very helpful question. And Ms. Nash, I thought, gave a pretty good answer. And I know you guys don't have the ability to strike line items, but I feel like every year it's like there's this secret pile of money that's hiding somewhere. I want to hear where that is at the budget hearing. I want to hear where that is at least by the annual town meeting. I'm not hearing that. And it's like, it's always like this big mystery secret pile of money. If it's there, let's know where it is. Let's ask Miss Nash, what about this? What about this? What about this? Where can we save this? Let's air that out. Let's have that conversation. That's a productive conversation. And I thank the person who came up and asked about that line item, because that's very helpful. Okay, and we get to this thing, and it's just like, this big, the schools are hoarding, and it's this big secret thing. We're talking about cutting positions. Okay, when we've gone too far, when we're laying off people who I think, the town agreed to some contractual obligations to these people. This is meaningful cuts. This is not fluff. I was just talking to somebody who is one of the people who's going to lose their job. Just happened to run into them. And, they were talking about how they go to all the Killingly music events and takes their daughter there. And her husband was just chaperoning at my other son's field trip. So this affects real people and affects the kids in our school. And I want to be talking about real numbers and real solutions, and this should happen way earlier in the process, please, next year. I hope we can do better next year. It's not about the party. It's about a really functional process, and let's take down the temperature on some of this stuff if we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken O'Connor, Taft Street, Danielson, Connecticut. Thank you, Council, for what seems like a pretty thankless job. I, for one, as a citizen, would like to thank you for all you're doing and all you put up with. From looking at the last meeting, it doesn't seem like you're going to get any thanks. So hats off to you. So all I got to say is this. The residents of Killingly elect you to do a job, to represent us. 698 voted no. 681 voted yes. I don't care why. They gave you a mandate. In this budget, there was a motion made to increase it by $1.1 million. We voted no. Initially, there was an increase for $550,000, 1.7%. Last year, it was requested 4.98%. The BOE got 1.24. I think this is pretty close, and I urge the council to go ahead and stick with the original budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Matthew Sumner, 23 Tamarack Circle, Dayville, Connecticut. I'd like to take this time to encourage the town council to really look at the results from the last referendum. As the last gentleman said, he didn't point out a few things that are in the actual details of it, but I originally thought about talking about the impact more cuts would have on the students, but I honestly don't think that had much impact on a lot of members of the town council at our last meeting, so I'm going to choose to just stick with the numbers. When most people look at the results, I'm guessing they think that since the education budget did not pass, it needs to be reduced. However, if you actually look at the results, the majority of the voters actually want the education budget to be passed at the current proposal, the 1.1 increase or higher. The results, yes, were 681 yes votes and 698 no votes. However, 44 of those no votes stated that they think the budget is too low. Those voters are asking for an increase on the proposed budget. They're not asking for it to be lower. They're not voting for the same thing and as the other no voters or the people who wanted the budget to did not want the budget to pass and wanted it reduced. So if we look at the numbers like that, there are actually 725 voters who wanted the budget passed or higher, and only 654 who wanted it reduced. I realize that's pretty close, so probably shouldn't go up that much or decrease that much, honestly. The vote actually does suggest that they should consider a slight increase on our current proposed budget. I would ask that the town council members look at that vote and what it really indicates and not ignore those 44 voters. I've heard many comments in papers from members that say the voters clearly want this reduced. I 100% disagree with that. I'm not saying it was overwhelming, it was a very close vote, but there were 44 people. In my opinion, they're not really no votes. They're actually yes and then some. So as an elected official, I hope that you do not ignore the fact that there were more people that want this budget passed at the current proposal or higher, and that you really are listening to the voters and are more concerned, really listening to voters, and that you were not worried about our own personal agendas. When making the decision, please keep this in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Christina Stravato, 60 Dog Hill Road. The only thing I wanted to say that wasn't already said, I was thinking the same thing about the numbers. And the only other thing to keep in mind is that they weren't asking for more than what we're already doing. The budget wasn't to increase what the schools are doing, it was just to maintain. If you really look at the charts that were presented, it's really just about maintaining. It's not about trying to do, wow, greater, bigger things, which would be amazing for our school district. We understand taxpayers can't pay for all that wow. And maybe someday we'll be able to, but we can't right now, and we get that. It was just to maintain what we have, which isn't all that amazing. I mean, we are trying really hard in this district to make it amazing, but there is so much more that other districts can offer because they have a higher budget and they have more to give. And we have a challenging population in this district. That's just the facts. It takes staff. It takes people. It takes commitment. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I have a little cold, sorry guys. Sarah Sumner, I live at 23 Tamarack Circle in Dayville. I can't see you and read this, so that's a problem for me. I do want to thank you guys. I know that this job is not easy. I'm going to talk about something I don't really understand, so I tried to understand it when I listened to your town council meeting 2 weeks ago, or last week at the vote, when you guys had that meeting at the vote, where I think it was Mr. Whitehead who talked about, I understand that you don't want the education budget to go up, because every year you have to meet that. I understand that, like, if it goes up by this much, then next year you can't go down anymore. So I understand that part of it. And you talked about something about if the town took on the expense for the access road, and the Board of Ed could use non-lapsing for that cost, and then they wouldn't have to increase their budget by so much. And I think that just maybe pushes it to the following year, but I do think that that might be something that you guys could look at and make it a way for us to sustain an education budget that I do feel like, once again, I've been here for, I talked to you guys last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, I don't remember anymore. But I do see a lot of progress. I've been in this district, once again, I've been a teacher for 25 years, I've been in this district for 22. I have seen such progress and growth over the past few years with the staff and teachers we have, and these kids get so much from us. I don't want to see things that they need go away. But I also understand your job is to make it so that we as a town can afford it. So when I listened to that, I would like to say I would love if you thought about that as something that you could do to help balance this budget. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am a parent of a child that spoke at that past meeting that we had recently. My name is Lucille Garcia. I live at 281 Mechanic Street. My husband wanted to be here tonight, but he works at the Veterans Administration and works a swing shift so that I can be the default parent and do all the things with the kids. I believe in public service. I've never been to one of those meetings before, even though I've worked in the district for, 12 years now. I used to serve on the Wetlands Committee for this town, and I was pretty disgusted by the comments made this past Tuesday. I've had some time to reflect, gather my thoughts, and I think if you're going to have an opinion about parenting, invite me to your meeting, put me on your agenda.
Rather than speak about the last meeting, if your comments are pertinent to the budget deliberations, we will definitely listen to them.
Sure.
But to comment on a previous meeting that wasn't Board of Education budget related,
Sure.
It goes against the rules of procedure for this meeting.
Okay, I'll come to the next meeting for that. So back to the budget.
Thank you.
I did submit a letter as an employee. So I'm an occupational therapist by trade. I'm not sure if any of you know what that is, but my primary job is in Killingley Public Schools. And I've worked in healthcare for the last 17 years at various nursing homes in the area. I'm a hard worker. And since 2020, the gap has significantly become so big with children coming in from birth to 3, kindergarten, that they don't have basic skills to blow their nose, unzip their backpacks, feed themselves, things that I haven't even seen in third world countries as a person who used to travel internationally and provide free therapy in third world countries. So I don't know what suggestions you might have for that, but I take occupational therapy intern students from various colleges to help close that gap, and those students clearly are not paid, and I take between 2 and 4 interns a year. The staff at Goodyear and KCS can attest to that, and I train them well, get them ready for the job force, but that's not part of my job, but it's something I feel I need to provide to get these students caught up, because they can't hold pencils, they can't hold crayons, they lack social skills, they are stuck on tablets, and the healthcare in this area isn't that great, and so things are not detected before they come to us. So we work really hard and diligently to get these kids ready for KMS. Come shadow me for a day. I would invite you to come and see the work that we put in. We work really hard. It might not seem that way to you, but not only do I work in town, but I'm a parent of little kids, and let me tell you, I root for all the kids at KCS. In school, on the field, anywhere I see them on the mat. We have a problem with kids not having basic skills to help themselves with their hands and eye coordination. And there's academic needs that they need to meet, but they can't help themselves in the toilet and diapering. So I don't know what you propose to do for that, but there's a big gap between them coming in and us getting them ready for the next building. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Last call for public comment. I will say,
Patrice Rogers, I live on 223 Gorman Road in Brooklyn. I just heard this afternoon that you were having this meeting, so I didn't prepare anything. But I'd like to suggest, I looked at the ballot for that vote that happened. It was online. I looked at it and I thought to myself, I'm pretty aware of the issue, but the ballot was confusing. I looked at it and I thought, it doesn't say which budget you're voting for. Is it the 1.1 million increase or is it the original budget? And then you have the yes and no's. And I thought, why not make a ballot that has everything on it? For example, you could put a little sentence there that said, do you vote for the, this budget? No. And then where there's an opportunity to say why, because it's too high or too low, specify that if you vote no because the budget's too low, specify that your vote will be counted in a certain way. So I just want to suggest, I liked a lot of the things I read and heard tonight, but I'd like to suggest that the next ballot just be a little more clear, that you have at the top exactly what you're voting for, like the details, and then forget the yes and no and low and high, and just, if you're going to have it, explain what the result of that would be. And as somebody mentioned in one of the emails that I read over there, if the numbers aren't adding up, like the 44 people that said no because the budget's too low, and you add that to the people, if you add, I can't remember exactly how to say this, but if you add those numbers up, there's a little mistake there, right? You agree with me, right? There's a little mistake. So why not have another vote, make the ballot a little clearer, and then, see what happens? Because I think it's clear that the people who did vote wanted the budget with the 1.1 million added, and that's not what happened. So if you want to really listen to what the town says, maybe redo the vote. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. I know you guys have a tough job. I do.
thank you. Any more public comment? Last call for public comment. Seeing no further public comment, I will state that we did have several public comments that were submitted by email. Those are available on the town's website. There was also paper copies of them when you came in. If you want to look at those, you can grab a copy of those. So at this time, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is item 5, and we have no old business, so we'll move on to item 6, new business, deliberation of the Board of Education budget. I will take this time before I entertain a motion to address a couple comments. As far as the vote count, every single budget I've been a part of, and this is now my 8th year on the council, if you look at who voted too high or too low on the budget, on the ballot question, it specifically says if you vote no, to vote that you can vote whether you're voting no because it's too high or you're voting no because it's too low. Every year we'll have more votes for high and low. The total will be higher than the no count. So you will always have people who have voted yes for the budget, but have also said that it's either too low or too high, even though the ballot for the budget specifically says if you vote no, vote why you voted no. So to the comment that you had the 698 people who voted no on the budget, you had 44 people vote that it was too low. There's no way to quantify how many people voted no on the budget that it was too low, because you don't know how many people voted yes for the budget and put that it was too low, or voted no for the budget and put it was too low. the way the votes are tallied, there's no way for us to differentiate between that. So we could have had substantially more people who voted yes and checked off high or low than what would be represented here. So you could have had 650 people that voted no that checked the box high or low, and then you could have had 100 people who voted yes that checked high or low as well. The way the budget vote is tallied, there's no way for us to see that in our budget total. As far as the budget, the ballot being confusing, what goes to the referendum vote every year is what comes out of annual town meeting. That is posted on the town's website. It's posted multiple places as far as what the numbers are at least a week before or roughly a week before the meeting. So that is out there to the public. It is available. I don't know how much more we can do as far as changing the wording on the ballot, because a lot of that is controlled by the state of Connecticut as well. That being said, I will open up to other council members if they want to make comments regarding what was stated tonight during public comment period before I entertain a motion.
I think it's an imperfect process, as all, you do the best you can. I know my first year I was telling somebody that I definitely directed like 5 people to go out and do the wrong thing, and there's like, I'd be open to, if we wanted to look at it sometime in the future, the charter, is there a way to make it clearer? I think it is confusing. That's my opinion. And once you really learn the system and you're familiar with it, then you can, but if you're kind of a new person and looking at it, it's somewhat confusing.
Thank you.
So when I look at the numbers, I agree with you, Mr. Anderson, that there's no perfect way to look at the number and know that the people voted was too low, that they voted no for it, and it costs. That's fair. But I look at that number. We say that we're serving our constituents, and if I'm doing the math right, we'll round it. We'll say 1,400 people voted. 1% of that would be 140 people. The difference was 17. So this budget didn't pass by like 1/10%. So to not take the other constituents into consideration when we deliberate here on a number that I think is amicable. Again, I stated in the beginning, we voted as the Board of Finance for the $1,099,000, $1.1 million, which was the contractual obligation as a council. That's about 40% of the 2.4. It may not be what the Board of Ed and the school system is looking for, but I thought it covered contractual, and that was my opinion from the first, and I'm going to stick with that. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt a resolution approving the Town Killingley operating budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. Be it resolved by the Town of Killingley, by the Town Council of the Town of Killingley, that in accordance with Section 1005 of the Town Charter, the budget for the Town of Killingley, Connecticut for the fiscal year July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026 in the amount of, bear with me 1 second, I'm adding up here because my budget numbers are split. That would have been 2, 3, 13, 5. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jen. The town budget that passed was $23,628,755, correct?
23,629,755.
755. Okay. Sorry, I had a calculation error. So the first number would be in the amount of $23,629,755,000. That is actually the number that's already passed on the town side. And that would be allocated of general government, and $47,938,817 allocated to education. And could you give me the total combined of that?
I'm sorry,
I
could
can-
you give me what
Yep.
your education figure is, please?
$47,938,817.
Okay, so just to confirm, that was 47,938,817.
Yes.
That gives you a total of 71,568,572.
Okay. So that would be the total combined budget. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt that resolution.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Whitehead, seconded by Ms. Wakefield, and at this point, I will open up discussion. For the public, just so you have a awareness of where those numbers fall, compared to last year's education budget, that will be an increase of $554,978 over last year's education budget. Total impact to the mill rate, total impact to taxes on the education side would be, I'm trying to do the numbers right here. Jen, I don't know if you've got those faster than I do.
I don't have that particular page open, but I can calculate that if you give me a minute.
Okay.
I was only prepared for total mill.
Sorry. Just, the number I came up with was 905,391.
$905,391 is what I have, and that's a net mill rate impact for education of 0.53.
Thank you. So again, as I stated, the increase over last year's Board of Education budget would be, at these numbers stated, would be $554,978. A total impact to taxes would be an increase in taxes for the Board of Education would be $905,391. And that would be a 0.53 mil increase for the Board of Education budget. Jen, do you have what the total number of the mill rate would be if that were to pass?
Yes, it's 1.13.
And that would put the mill rate at?
21.45.
Okay. I will say, I always hear about the MBR, and how once you go up with it, you can't go back down. One thing that was talked about was the startup costs. The superintendent talked about the startup costs for the Therapeutic Academy and how down the road it will be an advantage to the town by having a Therapeutic Academy. And I can definitely see the benefits to us bringing that in-house rather than outsourcing it. My only thought is if we're absorbing startup costs into the education budget, that is going to impact the MBR. And if those are specifically startup costs, in excess of $1 million for that, my opinion, I would rather see, instead of that cost being absorbed out of the Board of Education budget, use the non-lapsing account to balance that, to offset those costs for the startup for the Therapeutic Academy. At that point, instead of using budgetary dollars to cover the startup for the Therapeutic Academy, which if that's just for startup and if that's going to be a benefit as it was presented to us starting next year, once the startup we're over through the startup costs, at that point you've hit the MBR, you can't go back. Whereas if you're using it out of non-lapsing, that doesn't hit the MBR. So you could, I would much rather see the Board of Education use non-lapsing account for the Therapeutic Academy than cut positions. And unfortunately, as a council, we can't tell the Board of Education how to spend their money. But as it was talked about tonight, it was brought up, things like the access road. I hate to see stuff like that get built into an education budget, because that's something, once you spend that money, you can't go back. And it's, I would rather see the non-lapsing account be used towards the startup. Maybe not use the whole account, but use some of that account for the startup to, and then you're still also getting over a $500,000 increase over last year's budget. So between that and not using budgetary dollars to cover the startup and use non-lapsing, I would much rather see that done rather than cutting positions. But like I said, that's not up to the council, that's up to the Board of Education to make that decision.
Where does the non-lapsing sit now? The number?
That would be a hard question to
Okay.
answer. I know that they could potentially transfer up to $500,000 in there based on the audit that was just accepted. It depends on how much they've spent currently, and I don't have those figures available.
Fair enough, thank you.
So if it was 500,000 and they were gonna transfer all of that into the non-lapsing, that 500,000 plus the 500,000 increase, would definitely go a long way towards, or use more money out of the non-lapsing on top of the 500, go towards the startup costs. So.
I think the voters in Killingly, I think the residents in Killingly, along with the voters in Killingly, because not all residents vote and not all taxpayers are residents, but I think in general our population, particularly in the northeast corner, is very pragmatic. They're very down to earth. They want to be able to pay their bills. They want to take care of their children. They want to make a better future. And I think they're very understanding that just like their personal budgets have gone up, and they've had to make concessions and maybe go without going out to eat or going out on a bigger vacation, maybe staying home and doing stuff around town. They've made adjustments so that they can continue to do what they enjoy, but they just can't expend the way they want. And I think some of the point out that Mr. Anderson just brought out, just better use. I mean, one of the things that came out during Coffee with the Council is uniforms are replaced on a schedule. So what happens to the other uniforms? Maybe we don't replace all the uniforms. Maybe we take a break from replacing uniforms and use the uniforms that you have. Almost all, I think, if not all, almost all the uniforms just say Killingly. They don't have a mascot. They don't have anything else on it. There's no reason to replace a perfectly good uniform. We've done it for years. Then when you would add new uniforms, the seniors would get them. Seniors would always have first pick, and then the underclassmen pick from there. It's not the way you like to do it, but sometimes you have to, I love using butter on nice fresh baked bread, but sometimes I can't afford the butter because it's too expensive, so I have to go with, the margarine option. I think, and like Mr. Anderson also said, and it's state law, we can't tell the Board of Ed how to spend their money, but maybe, just maybe, looking at things and maybe the way everybody has to look at their personal budgets when you look at the budgets that you have, because there's definitely areas that you can trim back without touching the classrooms, because that's, my heart goes out to those classroom teachers. I supported them for years. I continue to support the students in whatever way I can. But, it's sometimes you just got to make the tough decisions. And I thank you, Mr. O'Connor, for your kind words. It isn't an easy job, but somewheres you gotta find that middle road, and you gotta get rid of the emotions, and you gotta look at the facts. And the facts are that 6,000 members of our town are on Medicaid, and that means they've probably got locked-in incomes, and they can't afford that $27 a month increase. Might mean the difference between them taking their blood pressure meds or them ending up in the hospital, which would be even worse. Or being able to eat a meal because they can't see the meds or your food. So I think we need to think about everybody and let's look at the big picture. It's kind of down the middle, both sides of the budget. Monetarily, it's a difference, but 0.6 is 0.6, and I know I can defend every line item on the town side, and I would, and so I just see this as a really good compromise. It's not going to be easy, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
I
Mr.
agree with you,
Wayne.
Tammy and Mr. Chairman. But in response to, and I apologize, Ian, I don't remember your last name, but we were requested, maybe Jason can give me some background information, but we had the same questions a lot of the taxpayers asked about the town budget. And what we have devised is now you can go on the town website and you can see exactly where every dime goes. So there's a great amount of transparency, and maybe that would benefit the taxpayers if the Board of Education did the same thing, had the same transparency. Then there wouldn't be any question at all about where the money's going. I mean, there shouldn't be any question anyway. Everybody's trusted, but that gives everybody a warm and fuzzy feeling, if you will, of where the money's going. So that's what I would like to see.
Thank you. I will add that I have asked the Board of Ed to do that as well. When the town was first looking to implement the financial transparency software that you spoke of, basically, so everyone knows, it basically shows where the money goes in each department, and it actually gives you the ability to look at each individual check to see where the money goes. So there's no question as to where the town's money, where the taxpayers' money is going on the town side. You can see to the penny where every penny is spent. And I've encouraged the Board of Education to do that. That would answer a lot of questions, especially talking about, as Mr. McDonald brought up, the question of where's this extra money coming from, especially the years where, and I know where some of it did come from, the years where there was huge surpluses coming back. While in my council seat, I can understand where the money's coming from. I know the general public. I've heard it a lot of times from the general public. Why are you giving the Board of Education more money this year when they turned back $1 million this year, $1.5 million that year? And I have, and because of my seat and my knowledge, I have the ability to explain some of that. Can I explain every single dollar? No. But if the Board of Ed were to use financial transparency software like the town does on our expenditure side, that would give me a place to go, okay, well, you can go look here, and you can see dollar for dollar what every check went to. And that may clarify a lot. So that is something that I've suggested to the Board of Ed in the past, and I tried to push them to do it back when we started doing it. And maybe it's something I need to suggest to the Board of Ed again. Couple other things I do want to acknowledge. I did get a lot of feedback myself, and not from council members here, from people in the public that have reached out to me, that have said, after the annual town meeting, that the council should cut the Board of Education to a flat budget. And I basically stood against doing that. I know there's contractual increases as far as pay raises. I know the cost of supplies goes up. But when I see things like the Therapeutic Academy built into the budget rather than using MBR, rather than using non-lapsing account and seeing it impact the MBR, that's one spot I can see where money could come from. But I also look at the fact that the town got hit with an unfunded mandate from the state. The same thing happened to the Board of Education. And I really wish everyone would reach out to our representatives in Hartford, because right now, Killingley taxpayers are having to pay 42% of the tuition for out-of-town students in our VOAG program. While I fully support our VOAG program, I do not feel it's fair for Killingley taxpayers to be paying for out-of-town students' educations. But because of what passed at the State House, unfortunately, that's the case right now. And the Board of Education took a huge hit. And that's why there's a difference. There's that $400,000 difference in between the $500,000 increase to the Board of Education budget over last year and the $900,000 increase in taxes, because the Board of Education lost roughly $400,000 in revenue from surrounding towns that send their students to Killingley because of state statute, because of what passed at the state level. So I can't get behind a $0 increase, which would be a decrease, even though if you look at it, a $0 increase would be a decrease over last year in a sense that you're increasing taxes. So, I encourage everyone to write to, I've already reached out to my state representative as far as do what you can. Try and get this changed to where each town is paying for their students, and other towns taxpayers aren't required to pay tuition for out-of-town students. That, to me, that's just not fair. It's not fair to Killingley taxpayers.
I agree with this sentiment. If I do that math, if they lost 400,000, we give them 554, it means that we're really only giving them a delta of 154,000. So we basically are giving them a flat budget. If they lost 400, we give them 554.
No, because what ends up happening is you're giving them 555 more.
Okay.
But they're also losing revenue. They're losing revenue, not from the budget side, from the revenue side. That's why it's a over $900,000 impact to the taxpayers. So the Board of Education is getting $554,000 more than last year.
Yep.
In the budget. So the budget increase is $554,000 from last year.
Yep.
Now, if you look at the budget, the taxpayers don't pay that whole budget amount. They only pay the full budget amount, which would include the $554,000 increase, minus grants and other revenues. Some of those other revenues are the tuitions that the Board of Education receives from out-of-town students. They're seeing a reduction in that revenue of tuition and out-of-town students, specifically for the VOAG program, because of the state statute that passed. So the Board of Education is seeing a $554,000 increase in their budget over last year.
Agreed.
But the taxpayers are having to pay $905,000 for a $554,000 increase.
Understood. But the school is not, that's the burden, the taxpayer's taking the burden, but the school is getting 554, is what we're.
The school's getting an additional, their budget is going up 554, but they're getting 905,000 more in taxes.
I get it. There's no perfectly fair way. When I look at 1/10 of 1% of missing the vote, it's tough. To me, that's a, it's a split decision. It's hard because to look at Tammy's rate, to look at a third of the folks in town being on Medicare and Medicaid, I get it. But the one thing that I see is this area has such a large number of disengaged youth, and it's many things. It's socioeconomic. We're in a tough area for these kids, and I just feel like I don't want to see this road continue to get worse. You're seeing it, and there's many factors. Affordable housing, nobody wants it. No town wants it. Maybe a little off topic, but nobody wants more affordable housing. It doesn't matter where you go, and we're seeing more and more people disengaged, and more people that frankly are living in the woods, and our children, our men especially, to the tune of 38%, are not even participating at the age of 15 to 26, and this is just an area that I think. The devil's in the details. This is a tough one. I just would have liked to see 40% of what they asked for, but this is where we are.
Thank you.
Well, I had many people reach out, and it was the same thing as Tammy had said, that they're afraid that they're going to lose their homes. And just as at home, you have to budget. So I have the extended version of the Board of Education budget. So there's a $24,000 IT table. Is that a need or an ask? $50,000 was added in case children don't pay for their lunches. That shouldn't be added to the budget. That should come out of non-lapsing fund. Why are taxpayers paying for socks for sports? My kids bought their own socks. Those are just a few of the things. And all those things add up very quickly.
I agree, but I will have to say this. I'm 55 years old, and part of my fiscal planning is that when I'm 70 to 80 years old, I have to plan that my taxes are not going to be what they are today. So I also have to fiscally plan for my future. We all do. They're not going to be the same. So that the argument, as much as it tears both ways, that's how you plan. That's how you plan your future. Fiscal responsibility means that you're prepared for this. If you're prepared, your car payment's not going to be the same, your electric's not going to be the same, your health insurance isn't going to be the same when I'm 70 as it is when I'm 55. It's not. So to put the burden on one and not put the burden on the other, I think is extremely unfair.
Thank you.
I'll go. I will say that I was flooded with calls for $1 to just give the school budget $1, and I told every one of them that I'm not comfortable with that. It was a very close vote. That definitely holds weight, in my opinion. But another point that was made to me was that a pamphlet went out in people's backpack to all the students about the budget. It made me wonder, like I know with election law, I don't know what was legal or what wasn't legal, but it did make me wonder about what if there was a pamphlet that went out, somehow using, public property or funds or something like that, went out to all the elderly or went out to, every gas station or just what, it just made me wonder about the results of the turnout, and placed some doubt in my mind about the closeness of it, although it's definitely still weighs. So for me, going back to the original budget, which is all we've done, which we had all hashed out together, is kind of like setting the clock back. It just set the clock back to before the crazy meeting happened and the things happened that, maybe were mistakes or, not equal in terms of election law, like how election law looks at things, and that there will be another chance for a vote. People can still go out and vote, that if they don't like this, and the town can still decide. Again, everybody knows that I think the school is doing a good job, and that I think the school system has become much more transparent, like Dr. Nash does a zero-based budget, and they do line by line. So maybe it's not perfect, but I think it's much better than it used to be. And in terms of just, Tony, if I'll answer your point about you should prepare and this and that, I think it's very hard, when you're planning a one-year budget or whatever for the school system is different than you're planning 30 years out and a governmental, consistent administration change and policy change. Like it's a very difficult thing to plan 30 years as opposed to 1 year. So I don't know that I agree with that preparation. Anyways, so I think it is a compromise. I don't think people realize how we just got flooded with, I've been flooded with, people saying for $1, and I said, I just can't do that.
Thank you. One other comment I will make, in regards to your comment about the actual ballot and the way it's worded, our acting town manager, Buddy, gave me a copy of the town charter, which I've been looking over, and it's the town charter that sets word for word what is put on the machine vote. So any changes to that actually have to be done through charter revision. So that would be something where we would have to call for a charter revision committee. They would have to draft changes to the charter. The council cannot make changes to the charter. That can only be done through a charter revision committee.
And then it would have,
And then it would have to go
through
out
the
to, yep.
legal.
It would have to go through legal, and then it would have to get voted on as well by the public at a referendum vote before you could change the ballot itself. But that is something we can definitely look into.
I had one other thought. I was looking for it and I didn't write it down. I've been in a union about half of my life, and I really support unions. I think it's a great thing when people get together and, there's more power in unity and coming as a force and saying, hey, we believe this, and more power to you. But there is a difference between a union negotiating with a large corporation that at one point can go, you know what, I'm walking away from the table. I'm not going to accept this. Then there is a municipal union, which I think is problematic. I'm not against them, I just think it's problematic because the taxpayer cannot walk away from the table the same way that a corporation can. So I just throw that out there. Like when you were talking about increases the other day, like, yeah, I believe in cost of living increases, but I think it's just like the inflation question. Like you get into a thing where at some point, there is business needs and they become unmanageable, but the taxpayer cannot walk away. Like we are the only way that they can walk away from a deal that maybe you can't afford. So I'll throw that out there.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will read the resolution. Resolution approving the Town of Killenly operating budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. Be it resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Killenly that in accordance with Section 1005 of the Town Charter, the budget for the Town of Killenly, Connecticut for the fiscal year July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, in the amount of $23,629,755 allocated to general government and $47,938,817 allocated to education for a total combined budget of $71,568,572 is approved and shall be filed with the town clerk for admission to the annual town meeting for its adoption. The annual town meeting, the reconvened annual town meeting is set for June 2nd at the Killenly High School at 7 p.m. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on the agenda. Next item up is executive session, and we have nothing for executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion. Second it.
Motion was made by Ms. Barclay, seconded by Mr. Cottula. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.